Okay, this is part 3 in the series. If you've gotten here by mistake or somehow and haven't watched part 1 or 2, you can go into your top right hand corner at the very end, the last 30 seconds, and click on it, and it'll actually take you back to part 1, and you can go through it. And as always, at the very end of each section, in fact, the one coming up will be in your top left hand section, and will take you on to part 4. Let's go ahead and get into this again, where we had been showing that certain finds in Europe and Greece are showing that dating of some Homo sapiens relative is going back 670,000 years, and then they found another set of two sets of bones that date back to 800,000 years. And the last statement was made that any skull found in Greece dating back to at least 700,000 years, which is either Homo sapien or part Homo sapien, is in direct conflict with the out of Africa theory of human evolution. And it gets worse, though. To complicate matters even more for the scientific and archaeological community, which also means us and the view of the real world, we also have the very recent discovery of Enigma Man. This discovery again throws other previous accepted evolutionary models into the trash bin and seems to fall in line with the facts presented about the above Petrolona Man. Well, I don't know how they get that. There would have to be a statement about that exactly, but this, I don't know if you've seen it yet. I haven't done a video on it necessarily, but Enigma Man is someone that a couple of different leagues of science, Asian scientists and others got with and found a skeleton which is only dating back to a new species of hominid, not non-Homo sapiens, that was existing up until about the Younger Dryas age, it seems like, in that part. And he looks very primitive. In fact, no joke, how they used to show the Neanderthal and try to show as primitive as he did, the worst ones of those, the best one of this guy looks that way. And that's the modern recreation. And we know that Neanderthal didn't look like that. And this guy doesn't look anything like you could shave him up and then just witness him on by. No, he makes so easy a caveman can do it. He makes him look like a very modern thing. In fact, if you put them next to each other, there's no question which way evolution's going. So, interestingly, scientific results show that there were distinct African and Asian populations of the larger general species Homo erectus, and I've been saying this. This leads to the use of the term Homo erectus sensu stricto for the Asian Homo erectus, and Homo erectus remains one of the most long-lived species of Homo, having existed over 1 million years, while it is interpreted by some that Homo sapiens so far has existed for only 200,000 years. And this was written right before they had found the 315,000-year-old skeleton at Ibil Jerud. So that number can be changed slightly, but I've always said, because in the literature I was looking at, they had a few of the different skulls, and just looking at them, there were slight differences. And then they had the cranial measurements next to them and stuff, and it's like, well, these are kind of like this, and these are kind of like that, and these are like this. And it doesn't really look the same, and the cheeks are a little different. Even the eye sockets start to look different. The amount of sloping on the head, there was all kinds of different things that were showing up to be slightly different, that you see more kind of in this group and less in that group. And it looked like there's been a lot of vibration in these groups after spreading out, just like you'd think primates had done. You know, over here's a spider monkey, and over there's this, and there's an orangutan, and supposedly they're all closely related, and long-armed lemurs, and all these type things. So it, I don't know, it shows a connection. But Petrolona Man, however, has been dated to around 800,000 years. Now this easily double and a half, that 300, and it 4 times the number of the previous. So if he would have been found just 15 years ago or so, then people would have had a freaking jump on it. DNA evidence also suggests that the ancestor of part of the African population had in fact genetically interbred by interracial species mating with another species of hominid that was separate from modern humans, unknown. It is thought by some scientists most likely to be Homo erectus, whose offspring even can be found today in sub-Saharan populations. And it looks like it might be the variant of Homo erectus that's connected to. But they can't get the DNA out of Homo erectus bones just yet. But I don't know how much attempts they have tried now that they've gotten their method down a whole lot better. And I don't know if they have the Petrius bone or whatever of one of them to give a shot at it, and one that's down here versus one up here, and see the difference in the anomalies that you would see. For that's probably going to show us quite a lot of information. And it'll show you why something at the next step in each place is totally different than each other. It's not the small amount of Neanderthal and so on. It's the integration of one people had a thing that went this way, and the other people had an integration that went that way, and Asians had one that went this way. DNA results attest that EEMH, aka Cro-Magnon, and Asian multi-regional evolutionary models did not follow the same processes as the African evolutionary model. You'll see later the amazing facts of how Cro-Magnons, aka EMEH, from at least 40,000 years ago is not only synonymous to EMH genetically and physical features, but Cro-Magnon contradicts Darwinian and any evolutionary patterns also. Cro-Magnons appeared in Europe and Asia as completely new, separate species of human and an archaeological anomaly. At least when they first found them, it was distinct like that. Now they're going, oh, well, that's just these. But you see how they had them labeled, and then all of a sudden, no, that's guys that are around now. And so this view changes all of a sudden. Well, the man didn't change. His cranial measurements and all the things about him that we knew didn't change. All it took was genetics, and all of a sudden they go, oh, we never said that, and scooted him over here. Effectively. An EEMH population came out that did not resemble any other human population on Earth, and his appearance cannot be accounted for using previous evolutionary patterns. Also, Petrolona Man adds another evidence that contradicts some current interpretations. Polyanos also shown evidence that the skull found in Petrolona, Greece may in fact be the lineage responsible for the Thylacine lower Paleolithic sites. In other words, he might be the connection for early pre-modern humans in Europe are EMH. It's entirely possible that this would be a lineage that would go through. Even in the scientific, archaeological, and paleoanthropology community, a large segment are in disagreement with the previous interpretations. As just a few of numerous examples, when it was first discovered in 1974, Lucy was immediately interpreted and hailed as some kind of early human. Remember that? Lucy, oh, and put her on Time magazine and everything. After more intensive studies, however, it was found to be just an ape. A hominid, yes, primate, but just a very, very old ape, which isn't even certain if it's a male or a female or whether it was a biped at all. It had monkey feet, and it really doesn't even fit into our archaeological record correctly, but whatever. So then there's more, though. Remember Java Man? He was also not proof of an intermediary between apes and humans as touted, but was in fact found to be just an ancestor to modern gibbons. Australopithecus ramidus, a 4.4 million year old pygmy chimpanzee type creature discovered at Aramis in Ethiopia by Professor Timothy White in 1994, despite a 70% complete skeleton, it has again not been possible to prove categorically whether it had 2 or 4 legs. In other words, did it walk upright or not? And they've tried to say, oh, the hip looks like, oh, well, listen, a monkey doesn't do that, but they can stand up for a while and walk. But that's not the same concept. A bear can stand up, but then you wouldn't say a bear's an upright creature. can we have the same criteria for talking about humans as all the other creatures in a separate third-person point of view? It looks like we can't. Australopithecus anamensis was dated to between 4.1 and 3.9 million years. Discovered at Lake Turkana in Kenya by Dr. Meave Leakey in August 1995. That's Turkana boy. It's only its shin bone fragment has been used to back up the claim that it even walked on 2 feet. That perhaps it maybe is not so bow-legged wonky, and therefore that probably says that it stood up more. It's just really not convincing in a lot of these cases, and I've seen people have this argument. It also should be noted that in all of these and other cases, many of the skulls appear much, much more like modern-day chimpanzee skulls than anything approaching human. Yeah, they have a lot of prognathism in them and things. It just doesn't look right. The teeth, even the shapes of the teeth and the way the kernels are on the teeth, and they make little shapings in them and stuff, and a lot of these don't seem to relate to anybody from then on. And it's certain traits like that and a myriad of other things that say, well, no, that doesn't really attach, even though they've got this evolutionary chart that goes across getting bigger and bigger. In reality, that's not the way it works, and they still show it, right? Perhaps they are apes that are in some way walked on 2 feet at some time, and probably they didn't at all, but in the end they are still ape and monkey bones and skulls. And Australopithecus and things like this is not getting, it's not there yet. And you can look at those, listen, you can look at those all day long, and if you can't find one that shows a path that leads up to modern humans, you're just looking at monkey bones. And one day you might find one, but right now we got a bunch of different ones and no definitive line for certain. There's actually not been found even one missing link to this day, which shows some evolutionary theories. A very problematic fact that questions some previously basic ideas, a great giant gap of time with absolutely no clues or evidences, many theories based on these old ape hominin bones, many times involving just a few pieces of bone or teeth or a tooth or part of a skull, or in fact just pieces of very old apes and monkeys. Piltdown Man was discovered to be an outright forgery from the start, where they had taken orangutan's jawbone structure and tried to dye it up to make it look old, and people bought that crap. Then they found out about it, and then in school still to this day they'll show you Piltdown Man is right here on the scale of the charts, and that thing doesn't even exist. They show one standing up real good walking too after he got upright, and they ain't got no proof of that guy fitting in anywhere into our tree. Most of the people in the middle of that scale chart are on similar paths and died out and didn't go anywhere. So to put them together and show, well, this is kind of how man came, is showing a representative of what we feel, but at the same time their representatives are false and giving a false leading idea, for it looks like there are a lot bigger jumps. Some people have gone to the point of saying between the jumps that are shown just in the last 4 at the very right end, that there should be micro evolutions between each one of those, some 13 between each one. Not it goes 1, 2, but it goes 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, all the way to 14, and the 14th one is 2, and then there would be 14 more. It's just this huge amount of time that it would take. They look at an evolutionary chart of certain things like whales, and they go, well, in 1.5 million years they'll be about like this. Okay, well, we look back in 1.5 million years what we are, and there's no way in hell you can get from where we are now to where you were then. It doesn't work out. There has to be some incredible jumps all of a sudden. And again, there's supposed to be microevolution in between each one and all these, things that they show. And I'm not saying I'm going against evolution or rah, rah, rah. I'm saying that even in the human factory thing and what they're trying to show people, there should be a lot of things in between. Now, we're lucky if we find a fossil, but at the same time, the original concept they came up with all the stuff we got now, and if you shove that in front of them, they wouldn't have come up with the original concept anymore. It would be a different concept. That's one clear fact. But let's continue. As already touched upon, newer and more recent discoveries and scientific study results constantly greatly diverge and even contradict from what is popularly believed. New sticks and bones are constantly being thrown into the machinery, leaving even scientists and archaeologists to wonder again and theorize new scenarios and scientific models. Yeah, we left the door open and I got this fly that's pissing me off. However, these days, modern scientific methods and evidence throws new facts into our faces regularly, facts which correlate and give a better understanding. Skeletal evidence seems to point that evolutionary theories based on skull differences are imaginary, and even today there are visible differences found throughout the world. These differences actually consist of variations among different human races that have existed in the past, some of which have become extinct. It is then quite evident that what we see is the result of different human races living in the past and at some time, and not indicating different species or subspecies on a long evolutionary path. So what they're saying is there's some glitch in here and something made with something, and then all of a sudden popcorn, and that 13 gap disappears real quick. In fact, the whole idea of how this slow thing goes seems to be like, no, it looks like a few pieces with sizzling popcorn, and you're grasping at straws about all the other part of it. Somewhat. If you read into that differently, let me know down below. But what we are finding today is instead skeletal remains of different Homo races that once lived in the past. Some were extinct and some contributed to another nearby human race that was living at the same time as them. Others went on to forge new futures that had different histories without the same regional evolutionary process. But that's not the only difference. In the meantime, we are also still finding many archaic monkey-ape bones, as already shown. Those skeletal remains are also remains of different ape hominin races, and also sometimes skeletal remains simply showing variation just as evident in human races. So today we can see modern skulls that have archaic traits from 1 million years ago, and some that are the same as ones found 45,000 years ago, or even very similar to some of the ones from 1 million years ago, well, 800,000, which again contradicts evolutionary theory, unless somehow somebody went popcorn way before the other ones even got popcorn going. But that's not the theory here in any way, shape, or form. Right? Besides the three most well-known and documented human races, i.e. Cro-Magnons, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, how many more races of humans lived in the past? Well, we don't know, but the evidence that they existed is seen today. Only time and future archaeological tests and discoveries will tell. And again, here's that research that shows that Puglisi man 28,000 years ago had DNA which is found in modern Europeans today, and so there really hasn't been any changing. And so again, one has to pose the question, when did we do all that supposed evolution and changing from one race of people into another magically? This is a burial that's kind of important. It shows mammoth ivory. It's all been done into little bitty Fruit Loops. And that Fruit Loops was part of a shawl and a belting and arm wristbands, boots that had it at the top of it in big pieces and around the bottom of it in little pieces, buried in a fancy burial here, way, way back when. Modern human, though. So we'll go on to additional research. Where am I at on time? 20? Great. Using evidence from the rock record and fossil record, scientists have developed the geological timescale. The geologic timescale is an outline of major events in Earth's history. So this is the layering down through it, and what this is and what those times, and they know where certain places are in that, and all they have to dig through and then find it, and they take a few samples from that little area and get it tested and stuff, and it says, yeah, you're at 14,000, here's 22, here's da-da-da, and they go, okay, I'm right in line. This is so old. And they take from that same layer along with it, and anything they can find that's charcoal related, da-da-da, get it tested, everything. The geologic column is the Bible for evolutionists. All discoveries must line up and be interpreted by this geologic column, or they're thrown out. And this is a major issue since huge amounts of facts and evidence are tossed aside due to the worship of the column. If you think of it on those terms, pretty wild. But once they figured out this thing, it's the only way you can do it. It's like saying once they figured out classical music, they figured out that's the only way you can do it. And somebody, whenever I was growing up, turned it into goth metal, and it was the same scales and everything, but believe you me, it was nothing that they had ever thought of, even if you play it in their style with their symphony. Textbooks declare the geological column to be factual, chronological history of the Earth, but the whole thing was made up by pure imagination, and one textbook author was willing to admit this. Where she got this, HBH Earth Scientist, 1989, if there were a column of sediments deposited continuously in the formation of Earth, the entire history of the planet would be reconstructed. Well, yeah, it'd be just like a tree rings, but it's not. Unfortunately, not such column exists. Where sediments are missing, a break in the sedentary record occurred. Break results in gaps in record that may range from a few years to a few hundred to millions of years. Breaks in the sedentary record are called unconformities, and you could find that with like a river runs through it, and so it washed away the spot in that one spot, so it doesn't follow the same timeline, but it's in the same area. But if you were to dig out a larger area, you can actually see this sweeping and the change that goes in it, so that's not necessarily the truth in fact. With the help of a couple of other people, Charles Lyell created the geological column from pure hypothetical imagination. It was not based on experimentation and discovery via traveling the world and digging through smaller sedimentary layers. No, it was only done from a few sites, and then it was sent to other scientists to verify around the world, and they made it fit their little thing. And then now we're going on that made it fit little thing in known dates that really could be somewhat questionable. I think that's why sometimes whenever they take these archaeological sites, they do send some samples in from different layers correlating with it. And also if a layer has a little band in it that looks funny, they're like, what the hell's this? Date that for me. Charles Lyell introduced a lie called uniformitarianism. And we've talked about that. And the opposite of that is, I guess, what I am been called as a catastrophist. But uniformitarianism, which is based on pure assumption, uniformitarianism in geology basically means the slow geological processes we witness today are the way that it's always been for millions and billions of years. A real-life geologic column would be over 100 miles thick and should contain almost all remnants of the geological time periods, but in actual investigative research, neither of these conditions can be found to be true. And yeah, that's true, and it's not just going to lay it down into the sediment. And where is it getting all this dust from? I mean, mountains turn into dust, and it keeps putting a layer on the lower parts and putting it there. So surely the mountains wouldn't be building up a mound, but the ground would be. And then, of course, the ground's pushing up in places, and it screws it up. But they've tried to have this table they talk about, and this person wants to totally discount the table, and I can't really do that. I think in my heart that these geologists and stuff are taking samples, even though they're looking at it and they go, okay, here's this, and here's this boundary, and here's the quaternary. I think they're taking samples from that, and they're going, but let me verify. Because nothing makes a scientist more embarrassed than to be embarrassed. To come out and throw something out that's not quite there yet. Quite often their colleagues around them, going through a peer review process before it comes out, will figure things out like that. But other times there's a lot of papers that come out in the process of being peer reviewed and things, and as long as they feel like they're getting something good on it, they go with it. But in that same concept, if these things haven't been tested to the nth degree, you could be just babbling on about nothing that you found. Like this Enigma man, if they had the layering of that wrong, they could be off dating that man enough to make him look like an enigma when he's not. And I'm sure they did the testing, but if they were to have not done it and just said, okay, well, we found him at 6 feet, and let me look in my book, well, 6 feet says that he is blah, and went with it, then you might get a false assumption out of it, the whole idea, whenever, well, no, actually, he's at 42 feet, and it's eroded down to where you're currently looking at 6 feet, but this place used to be a much thicker. In fact, what's right at the surface is a long time ago. This is on an island where it's getting lots of rain and it's been eroding away. You know, there's a million and one scenarios, guys. Not that that's the exact standard. Let's go. This standard geologic column is supposed to be at least 100 miles or 160 kilometers thick. Some writers say up to 200 miles or 320 kilometers, representing the total sedentary activity of all the geological ages. However, the average thickness of each local geologic column is about 1 mile. In some places, the column has essentially zero thickness. In a few places, it may be up to 16 or so miles, or 25 kilometers, but the worldwide average is about 1 mile, or 1.6 kilometers. The standard column has been built by superposition of the local columns from many different localities. And this was Dr. Henry Morris saying this. And that's what I was saying earlier, basically, is they, strata, and then once people go through it a few times, and they say, well, that's what you're looking at. And while it may look like what you're looking at, picked out pieces down that strata, getting down to it, and in the level that you're in, and perhaps below, and any anomalies you find need to be done also, so you can say, well, these whole series of things date around this area in this strata at da-da-da-da-da, and you're confident of it. The notion that Earth's crust has an onion skin structure with successive layers containing all strata systems distributed on a global scale uniformly is not according to the facts. Approximately 77% of the Earth's surface area on land and undersea has 7 or more, or 70% or more, of the strata systems missing beneath. 94% of the Earth's surface has 3 or more systems missing beneath, and an estimated 99.6% has at least one missing system. So if you try to say these are all the same stratigraphy and it all works out the same, it doesn't necessarily. And I guess she's going through a large point here to make a point, or perhaps the point is being made and she's reiterating. This isn't a situation where the evolutionary model is slightly off the mark. The evolutionary model doesn't even come close to what we witness in reality. Yet this model still continues as a fact in modern textbooks because it deceives students into believing the geologic column has something to do with the facts that they're looking at. 80 to 85% of Earth's land surface does not have even 3 geologic periods appearing in correct consecutive order. It becomes an overall exercise of gargantuan special pleading and imagination for the evolutionary uniformitarian paradigm to maintain that there ever were geologic periods. And this is Dr. John Woodmorap, who was saying this back in 1981. Only a few locations on Earth, about 0.4%, of its area have been described with the succession of the 10 systems beneath West Nepal, West Bolivia, and Central Poland. Even where the 10 systems may be present, geologists recognize individual systems to be incomplete. The entire geologic column, composed of complete strata systems, exists only in the diagrams drawn by geologists. So when they draw that diagram on the side and say da da da, that is the dream model, and not even, never actually, the model of the sedentary layering the way it goes. Unless they make a stratigraphy thing that is separate from that when they show it, it's not the same. And this was by Dr. Stephen A. Austin, 10 Misconceptions About the Geologic Column, that he wrote in 2011. In other words, what Dr. Austin just said is that the only place you will find the other geologic column is in the textbooks. The geologic column doesn't even exist in reality. Some evolutionists will say there are around 30 places on the Earth that demonstrate the geologic full column, but it is not true, because it only means that there are 30 places on the Earth where the fossils line up the way the evolutionists want them to. But that doesn't mean the geologic column exists with its many miles of strata in that same location. Understand? You following me? I lost it on the 2 ones ago, but I follow this quite well. The geologic column is supposed to represent a vertical cross-section through the Earth's crust, with the most recently deposited, therefore youngest, rocks at the surface, and the oldest or earliest rocks deposited on the crystalline basement rocks at the bottom. If one wishes to check out this standard column, where can he go to see it for himself? There is only one place in all the world to see the standard geologic column, and that's inside of a test book. And Dr. Henry Morris and Gary Parker had said this back in 1982, speaking about the geologic column that they grew up with and are supposed to be touting. Some evolutionists have been a bit more willing to be honest about this imaginary column. One noted that Popper was describing the logical structure of the way things ought to be. In the real world, in the competitive fray that is science, data forging, plagiarism, and all manner of base and venal but utterly human failings make a mockery of the counter image of detached objectivity. Damn, that's thick. Such pure, dispassionate, cold logic is rare, though more common. One assumes that the cheating of its opposite extremes. And in old worldish, that's lighting into somebody. But that was written in 1985, so that's the way gentlemen have at you. In case you didn't understand what he was saying, the geologic column logical structure is the way things ought to be if evolution was true in the model the way they're showing it. However, the truth is that there's a lot of deception and lies, data forging, plagiarism, etc., that mocks the real world of mixed layers that look nothing like the geologic column. Detached objectivity we talked about. He finishes by saying that an evolutionist using good logic and honesty is rare, but people decide to respect their person and assume that they would never lie and cheat for a paycheck and fame, and specifically points out the deception of dispassionate to emphasize the emotional zeal at which evolutionary geologists perpetrate these lies. Donna M. Thomas noted, "It is crucial in our evolution to think for ourselves and to question authority. In this practice, be bold, be brave, and while also being cognizant of the consequences." Okay. Where are we at? 35? You must never be limited by external authority. Whether it be vested in a church, man, or book, it is your right to question, challenge, and investigate. Bhagat Singh Thind. Unthinking respect for authority is the greatest enemy of truth. Albert Einstein. It is the first responsibility of every citizen to question authority. Benjamin Franklin. And guys, I think that's it. Ta-da! And so here's all the lock-ins on it, previous post. Let's see if there's anything on there. Nope. And so very interesting, and it just makes me feel less confident about geologic records and what happened when. And if radiocarbon dating is factual, and if it's off by a factor of what, will we ever know? You know, and they've tested radiocarbon down, and I've had a full discussion on how they figure it out and how they go off of it and how it decays. But if that was off by a small factor, which they believe they're right on, then it would throw everything off just a little bit here. But as you start to get away from that point, it starts to get radically different. And now they've radiocarbon dated and got it figured out more to a point of logic, because it used to fail them around 40,000-50,000 years, but now after trying it and seeing where it shows the failings are as compared to other dates using other forms, they now realize what that scale is and how much you have to get it off by a hair of what it tries to tell you it is versus what it really is. Anyhow, very interesting about our evolutionary tree and all these findings that they're showing that's not going with the old model, and it's getting run over by a train of all this information. Meanwhile, they're still standing there trying to say, no, that's still the same thing. And it's like, no, every paper we've come out with saying, wow, look at this, it's not the same thing. And now you've turned around and went, yep, same thing, and just smiled and look around. It's not the same thing. And this out of Africa theory has been all but destroyed. Even at a dying glimpse at one time here not too long ago, I had heard somebody say, well, the creature that changed into all of the Caucasians and all the African sub-Saharan people was the same creature 1.6 million years ago, and it changed radically whenever it came out, and then that led to this, and they had hominin aggression they didn't, and everything else, and so, and you go, well, then if that's that far back on the evolutionary tree, you can't say that they ended up in the same place. But that's what the current paradigm is, you know, all exactly the same. And I think we can see through that also. And it's just a bid for a world order and all these type of things, and reality says that's not quite the way it went or it goes. And quit shoving third worlders into our country and trying to make us like it, because we're not liking it too much. There's a reason that people here are at this level and those people are here at that level. And you keep doing this and you think it's going to even it all out and everybody will be happy, but nobody will be happy. And the people that were making it all happen won't be very happy. Anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And I'm glad I got through with it. And this few times I thought it was going to go at least another one. And I'm going to look down below because it goes farther to see if it continues on. But that should be it. If there's another one that's in your top left-hand corner. Like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy. Peace.